In the small, sleepy town of Maplewood, life moved at a pace that seemed almost too slow for the modern world. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, the town was known for its charm, friendly locals, and a sense of community that had remained unchanged for decades. At the heart of this little town stood a diner called Peggy's Place, a cozy establishment with red vinyl booths, chipped formica tables, and a jukebox that played oldies from the 1960s. The diner was more than just a place to grab a meal. It was where people gathered to share stories, celebrate milestones, and find comfort in each other's company. For Emma Carter, the diner was her second home. She had been working there since she was 18, serving customers with a smile while juggling her dreams of something bigger. Emma was 25 now, living in a modest one-bedroom apartment, above a bakery. Her days started early and ended late, but she never complained. She had grown up in Maplewood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. Life hadn't handed Emma much, but she carried herself with dignity and warmth, qualities that made her stand out even in a town full of kind-hearted people. Despite her struggles, Emma always found joy in the little things: a perfect cup of coffee, a child's laughter, or the way the sunlight streamed through the diner windows every morning. Her co-workers adored her, and the regulars tipped generously, not just because of her efficiency, but because of the genuine care she showed them. One rainy afternoon, as dark clouds loomed over Maplewood, the diner buzzed with activity. It was one of those days when everyone sought refuge indoors, sipping hot chocolate or sharing plates of Peggy's famous meatloaf. Emma moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays laden with food and drinks, her apron tied neatly around her waist. She greeted each customer warmly, remembering their names and favorite orders. As she refilled mugs and cleared plates, she noticed a sleek black car pull up outside. It wasn't unusual for strangers to pass through Maplewood, but something about this car caught her attention. It gleamed under the dull gray sky, looking completely out of place on the wet, pothole-ridden road. Out stepped a man in an impeccably tailored suit, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he made his way toward the diner. He opened the door, letting in a gust of cold air along with him. Every head turned to look, curiosity rippling through the room. This was no ordinary visitor. It was Jonathan Reed, one of the wealthiest men in the country. His family owned sprawling estates, luxury hotels, and countless businesses across multiple states. People whispered about him often, though few in Maplewood had ever seen him in person. Rumors painted him as aloof, ambitious, and untouchable, someone whose life existed in a realm far removed from theirs. Yet here he was, walking into Peggy's Place like any other customer. Jonathan scanned the room briefly before settling into a booth near the window. His presence created an awkward silence, broken only by the faint hum of the jukebox playing Stand By Me. Emma hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should approach him. She had heard the stories about him, of course, but they felt more like myths than reality. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a menu and walked over, forcing a polite smile onto her face. "Hi there," she said softly, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Welcome to Peggy's. Can I get you something to drink?" Jonathan looked up, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers. For a split second, Emma thought she saw something vulnerable behind his composed exterior. "Coffee, please," he replied, his tone clipped but not unkind. As she scribbled down his order, she couldn't help but notice how different he seemed compared to the pictures she'd seen online. Those images portrayed a confident billionaire, larger than life, commanding attention wherever he went. But the man sitting before her appeared weary, almost fragile, as though carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Shaking off the thought, Emma returned to the counter to fetch his coffee. While waiting for his drink, Jonathan glanced around the diner, taking in the worn furniture and faded wallpaper. It was nothing like the upscale restaurants he frequented, yet there was a warmth here that money couldn't buy. The chatter of patrons, the clinking of cutlery, and the aroma of freshly baked pies created a comforting atmosphere. He watched as Emma expertly navigated the crowded space, her movements fluid and efficient. There was a grace about her, a quiet strength that intrigued him. When she brought his coffee, he thanked her with a nod, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Emma lingered for a moment, sensing an opportunity to break the ice. "First time in Maplewood?" she asked casually, leaning slightly against the edge of the booth. Jonathan nodded, stirring sugar into his cup. "Yes, actually, just passing through," he replied, his gaze dropping to the table. Something about the way he spoke hinted at sadness, though Emma couldn't quite put her finger on it. She decided not to press further, instead offering a warm smile. "Well, if you need anything else, just let me know. We've got some great pie today." As the afternoon wore on, Jonathan stayed longer than expected, nursing his coffee and occasionally glancing out the rain-speckled window. Other customers came and went, but his presence remained a topic of hushed conversation. Emma kept an eye on him, wondering what had brought him to such an unlikely place. Was it business, a personal errand, or perhaps something deeper, something he wasn't ready to share? Whatever the reason, she felt a strange connection to him, as though fate had orchestrated their meeting for reasons beyond her understanding. Eventually, Jonathan signaled for the check. Emma approached with the bill folder, placing it gently on the table. Before she could step away, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. But instead of handing over cash or a credit card, he did something unexpected. He grabbed her hand. Startled, Emma froze, her eyes widening as she stared at him. Without a word, Jonathan leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes turning toward them. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, realizing what he had done, Jonathan flushed crimson, muttered an apology, and bolted out of the diner, leaving Emma standing there, stunned and confused. The incident sent shockwaves through Maplewood. News of the billionaire's bizarre behavior spread like wildfire, fueling endless speculation. Some dismissed it as a publicity stunt, while others wondered if Jonathan had lost his mind. For Emma, however, the moment lingered in her mind long after the initial shock wore off. Why had he kissed her? What had driven such a powerful man to act so impulsively? And why did he seem so haunted when he left? These questions gnawed at her, refusing to let go. Little did she know, the answers would lead her on a journey unlike anything she could have imagined, a journey that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Emma woke up with the memory of Jonathan's kiss still vivid in her mind. She replayed the scene over and over again, trying to make sense of it. Had it been a spur-of-the-moment decision, a mistake, or something deeper, something tied to emotions she couldn't begin to understand? As she got ready for work, tying her apron around her waist and slipping on her comfortable sneakers, she told herself not to dwell on it. After all, what were the chances she'd ever see him again? Billionaires like Jonathan Reed didn't just pop into small-town diners twice. Still, as she walked into Peggy's place, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had shifted in some subtle but significant way. The diner was bustling as usual, filled with the familiar faces of regulars chatting and laughing over plates of pancakes and bacon. Emma threw herself into her routine, refilling coffee mugs and jotting down orders, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Jonathan. She wondered if he regretted his actions or if he even remembered them at all. Maybe he'd already dismissed the entire incident as an embarrassing moment best forgotten. But deep down, Emma felt there was more to it, something unspoken, something hidden beneath his polished exterior. Her instincts rarely let her down, and this time, they whispered that Jonathan Reed wasn't as invincible as he appeared. To everyone's astonishment, Jonathan returned to the diner later that same week. He arrived without fanfare, stepping out of his gleaming black car and walking inside as though drawn by an invisible thread. The room fell silent once again, patrons exchanging glances as he took a seat at the same booth by the window. Emma hesitated before approaching him, unsure of how to act. Should she pretend nothing had happened, or acknowledge the awkwardness head-on? In the end, she settled for professionalism, greeting him with a polite smile. "Good afternoon," she said softly, placing a menu in front of him. "Can I get you something to drink?" Jonathan looked up, his expression unreadable. "Coffee, please," he replied, his voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. As Emma turned to fetch his order, she noticed how tired he seemed, the dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. When she brought his coffee, she lingered for a moment, curiosity getting the better of her. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently, her tone laced with concern. Jonathan hesitated, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. For a brief second it looked like he might open up, but then he shook his head and forced a small smile. "I'm fine," he murmured. "Thank you." Despite his vague response, Emma sensed that he wasn't fine at all. There was a heaviness about him, a sadness that clung to him like a shadow. She wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but she knew better than to pry. Instead, she gave him space, checking in occasionally to refill his cup or ensure he was comfortable. He stayed longer than necessary, staring out the rain-streaked window as though searching for answers in the gray sky. When he finally left, he nodded curtly in her direction, leaving behind a generous tip and a lingering sense of mystery. Jonathan returned 2 days later, then again the following week. Each time, he ordered nothing more than a cup of coffee and sat quietly in his booth, seemingly lost in thought. The townsfolk grew increasingly curious, speculating endlessly about why the billionaire kept coming back to such an ordinary place. Some joked that he must have fallen in love with Emma, while others whispered that he was conducting secret business deals. Emma, however, paid little attention to the gossip. What intrigued her most was the change in Jonathan himself. With each visit, he seemed less guarded, more human. The walls he had built around himself began to crack, revealing glimpses of vulnerability beneath. One rainy afternoon during his third visit, Jonathan finally broke his silence. As Emma approached his table to refill his coffee, he stopped her with a quiet word. "Emma," he said, his voice hesitant but sincere. "Can we talk for a moment?" Surprised, she nodded and slid into the booth across from him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Jonathan stared at his hands, fidgeting nervously before taking a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "What I did last week, it was inappropriate. I shouldn't have kissed you like that." Emma listened intently, her heart softening at the sincerity in his voice. "It's okay," she replied gently. "No harm done." Jonathan shook his head, his jaw tightening as though struggling to hold back emotions. "It's not okay," he insisted. "You deserve an explanation." He paused, gathering his thoughts, then continued. "Years ago, I lost someone very close to me, someone who believed in kindness and humanity, the kind of qualities you embody. Seeing you reminded me of her and, I don't know, something inside me snapped. I acted impulsively, and I'm sorry if I embarrassed you." His confession caught Emma off guard, but it also explained so much. She studied his face, seeing the pain etched into his features. "Who was she?" she asked softly, sensing that he needed to talk. Jonathan hesitated, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Her name was Lily," he admitted, his voice trembling. "She was my fiancée. We were supposed to build a life together, but—" His voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Emma reached across the table, placing a comforting hand over his. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her own throat tightening. Jonathan nodded, blinking away tears. "Lily passed away 10 years ago," he continued, his voice steadier now. "After she died, I buried myself in work, convinced that success would fill the void she left behind. But it never did. Recently, I found letters she wrote to me before she passed, letters I never read until now. In them, she urged me to live fully, to embrace joy and connection. That day in the diner, when I saw your warmth and kindness, I realized how disconnected I've become. I kissed you because, I don't know. It felt like honoring her wish somehow." Emma's heart ached for him, her earlier confusion replaced by empathy. She understood now why he had acted the way he did, not out of arrogance or entitlement, but out of grief and longing. "You don't have to explain yourself to me," she said kindly. "But thank you for trusting me enough to share your story." Jonathan managed a faint smile, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for listening," he replied. Not many people would. Their conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan became a regular fixture at the diner, no longer content to sit silently in his booth. He started engaging with Emma, asking about her life, her dreams, and her struggles. In return, he shared pieces of his own world, revealing a side of himself that few had ever seen. They discovered common ground in their love for simple pleasures, a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, the sound of laughter, the beauty of nature. Slowly but surely, a bond formed between them, built on mutual respect and understanding. The townsfolk watched their growing connection with a mix of fascination and skepticism. Some admired Jonathan's humility, marveling at how he treated Emma with genuine affection. Others disapproved, convinced that their worlds were too different to bridge. Whispers followed them wherever they went, but neither Emma nor Jonathan paid much attention. They were too busy learning from each other, finding solace in shared moments that transcended societal expectations. One evening, after closing up the diner, Emma invited Jonathan to join her family for dinner. It was a bold move, given the stark contrast between their lives, but she felt compelled to extend the invitation. To her surprise, Jonathan accepted without hesitation. Her modest home welcomed him warmly, the scent of homemade lasagna filling the air as her mother and younger brother greeted him with open arms. For the first time in years, Jonathan laughed freely, sharing stories of his childhood and listening intently to theirs. His polished demeanor melted away, replaced by a man who simply wanted to belong. That night, as they sat around the kitchen table playing cards and sharing dessert, Jonathan realized how much he had missed out on by isolating himself. Emma's family treated him like one of their own, making no fuss over his wealth or status. Their acceptance meant more to him than any accolade or achievement ever could. And as he looked at Emma, her eyes sparkling with joy, he knew he had found something truly special, a reminder that life's greatest treasures aren't measured in dollars but in moments of authentic connection. By the time Jonathan left Maplewood that weekend, he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose. Emma had shown him that happiness wasn't reserved for perfect circumstances or ideal timelines. It was found in the everyday, in the people who mattered most. Though their paths might diverge in the future, he vowed to hold on to the lessons she had taught him. Little did either of them know, their story was far from over. As the weeks passed, Jonathan's visits to Maplewood became more frequent, and his presence in the small town began to feel less like an anomaly and more like a natural part of life. He no longer arrived in his sleek black car with the air of someone who didn't belong. Instead, he parked casually by the curb, stepping out with a relaxed demeanor that suggested he was exactly where he wanted to be. The townsfolk, though initially skeptical, started warming up to him. They noticed how he greeted people by name, asked about their families, and even tipped generously at local businesses. It wasn't just Emma who saw a softer side of Jonathan. Maplewood itself seemed to bring out a version of him that few had ever encountered. Emma, too, found herself looking forward to his visits. Their conversations grew deeper and more meaningful, touching on topics ranging from childhood memories to personal aspirations. Jonathan shared stories about growing up in a wealthy family, describing the pressure to succeed and the loneliness that came with living under constant scrutiny. He spoke of his father, a stern man who valued ambition above all else, and his mother, whose quiet disapproval of his relentless pursuit of success had always stung more than he cared to admit. For her part, Emma opened up about her own struggles, how she had worked tirelessly to support her family after her father walked out, how she dreamed of opening her own cafe someday, but felt trapped by financial constraints. In sharing their vulnerabilities, they forged a bond that went beyond surface-level pleasantries. Their connection didn't go unnoticed. Whispers spread through Maplewood like wildfire, fueling endless speculation about the nature of their relationship. Some believed it was purely platonic, a friendship born out of mutual respect. Others weren't so sure, convinced that there was something romantic brewing between them. The gossip reached a fever pitch when Jonathan attended the annual Maplewood Harvest Festival, an event he would have once dismissed as beneath him. But there he was, standing beside Emma as they sampled homemade jams, admired handcrafted quilts, and cheered on the pie-eating contest. Together they laughed until their sides hurt, oblivious to the curious stares and murmurs around them. Despite the attention, neither Emma nor Jonathan paid much heed to what others thought. What mattered most to them was the comfort they found in each other's company. For Emma, Jonathan represented a world far removed from her own, yet he treated her with a kindness and equality that made her feel seen and valued. For Jonathan, Emma was a reminder of everything he had been missing, a connection rooted in authenticity rather than superficiality. She challenged him to slow down, to appreciate the beauty and simplicity, and to embrace moments of joy without overthinking them. In her presence, he felt lighter, freer, as though years of emotional baggage were slowly being lifted. One chilly November evening, as golden leaves swirled in the wind outside Peggy's place, Jonathan made a decision that would change the course of their lives. After finishing his usual cup of coffee, he lingered at the counter, watching as Emma wiped down tables and chatted with customers. When the diner finally emptied out, he approached her, his expression serious but tender. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I need your help with something." Surprised, she set down her cleaning rag and turned to face him. "Of course," she replied. "What is it?" Jonathan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You've shown me so much about life these past few months, things I never realized I was missing. And now, I want to share that with others, specifically my family." Emma furrowed her brow, unsure of what he meant. Sensing her confusion, he continued, "I'm hosting a gathering at my estate next weekend, a mix of old friends, colleagues, and family members. It's usually a formal affair, full of pretense and politics. But this time, I want it to be different. I want you and your family to come." Emma blinked, taken aback by the invitation. "Me? At your estate?" she echoed, her voice tinged with disbelief. Jonathan nodded earnestly. "Yes, you've taught me the importance of real connections, of surrounding myself with people who matter. I'd be honored if you joined us." His sincerity left her speechless. For a moment she considered declining. After all, mingling with billionaires and socialites wasn't exactly her idea of fun. But then she remembered the warmth and acceptance her family had shown him during their dinner together. If anyone could bridge the gap between two vastly different worlds, it was them. After some deliberation, Emma accepted the invitation, agreeing to attend the gathering with her mother and younger brother. The days leading up to the event were filled with anticipation and nerves. Emma spent hours picking out outfits, debating whether she should dress formally or stick to her usual style. Her mother reassured her repeatedly, reminding her that confidence was the best accessory. Meanwhile, Jonathan prepared for the occasion with equal care, ensuring that every detail, from the seating arrangements to the menu, reflected the new values he had embraced. On the day of the gathering, Emma and her family arrived at Jonathan's sprawling estate, awestruck by its grandeur. The mansion stood atop a hill surrounded by manicured gardens and towering trees. Inside, elegant chandeliers cast soft light over marble floors, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Despite the opulence, Jonathan greeted them warmly, introducing them to his guests with pride. Emma couldn't help but notice the contrast between the stiff-polished individuals sipping champagne and her down-to-earth family, who stuck close together, exchanging shy smiles and polite nods. As the evening unfolded, tensions ran high. Conversations buzzed around them, peppered with references to exclusive clubs, luxury vacations, and lucrative investments. Emma felt out of place, aware of the glances and whispers directed her way. But Jonathan remained steadfast by her side, shielding her from judgmental stares and drawing her into light-hearted discussions about books, music, and travel. Slowly but surely, his efforts began to ease the awkwardness, creating pockets of genuine connection amidst the sea of superficiality. The turning point came when Jonathan addressed the crowd during dessert. Standing at the head of the table, He raised his glass and thanked everyone for coming. Then, turning to Emma, he smiled warmly. "There's someone I'd like to acknowledge tonight," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Emma Carter has taught me invaluable lessons about humility, resilience, and the true meaning of wealth. She reminds me daily that success isn't measured by what we own, but by the relationships we nurture and the lives we touch. Tonight, I celebrate not only her presence here, but also the perspective she's given me." A hush fell over the room as Jonathan's words sank in. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she realized the depth of his gratitude. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by hesitant applause that gradually grew louder. For the first time, Emma felt truly accepted, not because of what she wore or how she spoke, but because of who she was. Her family beamed with pride, while Jonathan's relatives exchanged surprised but approving glances. Even the skeptics softened, recognizing the sincerity in his tribute. By the end of the night, walls had begun to crumble. Guests mingled more freely, engaging in conversations that transcended class and status. Emma's mother bonded with Jonathan's aunt over gardening tips, while her brother impressed a group of executives with his knowledge of vintage cars. As the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere had transformed entirely, filled with laughter and camaraderie that felt almost magical. Jonathan watched it all unfold with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. Driving home later that night, Emma reflected on the evening's events. She thought about Jonathan's speech, the warmth of his family's embrace, and the unexpected friendships that had blossomed. Most of all, she thought about the journey they had embarked upon, a journey that had started with a single kiss in a diner and evolved into something far greater. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Their connection was built on a foundation strong enough to withstand anything. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she couldn't help but smile, knowing that the best chapters of their story were yet to be written. The days following the gathering at Jonathan's estate were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma. She replayed the events of that evening in her mind, marveling at how seamlessly her world had intertwined with his. The way he had spoken about her, in front of his family and friends, still brought tears to her eyes. Not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it had been so deeply sincere. It wasn't every day someone stood up and acknowledged another person's impact on their life, especially not in a room full of influential people who expected perfection. Yet Jonathan had done just that, unapologetically and wholeheartedly. Back in Maplewood, life resumed its usual rhythm, though things felt subtly different now. Jonathan continued visiting Peggy's place regularly, but their conversations carried a new weight, as if they had crossed an invisible line into a deeper level of trust. They no longer tiptoed around each other's vulnerabilities. Instead, they embraced them, finding strength in shared honesty. Emma began to see glimpses of the man beneath the billionaire persona, a man who longed for connection, who craved authenticity in a world that often rewarded pretense. And Jonathan, in turn, saw Emma not just as a beacon of kindness, but as someone capable of challenging him to grow. Their bond didn't escape notice in Maplewood. While some townsfolk admired Jonathan's humility and dedication to bridging the gap between his elite circle and Emma's modest upbringing, others remained skeptical. Whispers followed them wherever they went. Was this a fleeting fascination for Jonathan, or something more enduring? Could a relationship like theirs truly survive the pressures of wealth, status, and societal expectations? Even Emma's mother, though supportive, occasionally voiced concerns. "He's a good man," she would say, "but are you sure you're ready for what comes with loving someone like him?" Emma wrestled with these questions herself, though she tried not to dwell on them too much. Love, she reminded herself, wasn't about convenience or practicality. It was about choosing to walk alongside someone despite the challenges. Still, doubts lingered in quiet moments when Jonathan wasn't around. What if their differences proved insurmountable? What if his world demanded sacrifices she wasn't willing to make? For all the warmth and understanding between them, there was no denying that their lives existed in vastly different spheres. One crisp December afternoon, as snowflakes began dusting the rooftops of Maplewood, Jonathan surprised Emma with an unexpected invitation. He arrived at Peggy's place carrying a small wrapped box which he handed to her with a mischievous grin. Inside was a ticket to New York City, along with reservations for a weekend getaway. "I want to show you my world," he explained, his tone laced with excitement. "Not the polished version everyone sees, but the real one, the one I live." Behind closed doors, Emma hesitated, torn between curiosity and apprehension. Visiting Jonathan's home turf meant stepping into unfamiliar territory, where judgmental stares and whispered critiques might overshadow any sense of belonging. Sensing her hesitation, Jonathan placed a reassuring hand over hers. "You don't have to decide right away," he said softly. "But I hope you'll come. There's so much I want to share with you. Places that shaped me, memories I hold dear, and maybe it'll help you understand why I am who I am." His words tugged at her heartstrings, making it impossible to refuse. After discussing it with her family, Emma agreed to go, promising herself she would face whatever came her way with courage and grace. The trip to New York City was unlike anything Emma had ever experienced. From the moment they stepped off the train, she was awestruck by the city's energy. The towering skyscrapers, the bustling streets, the kaleidoscope of cultures blending together. Jonathan guided her through neighborhoods both glamorous and gritty, introducing her to hidden gems tucked away in plain sight. They visited art galleries, sampled street food from vendors whose carts doubled as cultural landmarks, and strolled through Central Park under a canopy of twinkling lights. For every extravagant experience, there was a simple, heartfelt moment that grounded them. A quiet bench overlooking the Hudson River, a shared laugh over mismatched coffee orders, a spontaneous dance in the middle of Times Square. Yet, for all the magic of the city, shadows loomed large. During their time in New York, Emma encountered glimpses of the pressures Jonathan faced daily. At a charity gala hosted by his family foundation, she watched as he navigated a sea of backslapping executives and air-kissing socialites, each interaction calculated and precise. Though he introduced her proudly to everyone they met, she couldn't ignore the subtle disdain in some gazes or the condescending remarks masked as compliments. One woman, draped in diamonds and designer silk, leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, "How does it feel to be the flavor of the month?" The comment stung, but Emma held her ground, responding with a polite smile and unwavering confidence. Afterward, Jonathan found her on the balcony, gazing out at the glittering skyline. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched into his features. Emma nodded, though her voice betrayed her frustration. "It's exhausting, isn't it? Always having to prove yourself, always being judged." Jonathan sighed, leaning against the railing beside her. "It is," he admitted. "But tonight reminded me why I'm trying to change, to build a life where those judgments don't matter anymore. A life with you." His words warmed her heart, but they also forced her to confront the reality of what lay ahead. If they chose to pursue a future together, it wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, people determined to tear them apart, moments of doubt and insecurity, sacrifices neither of them could fully anticipate. But standing there, surrounded by the city's dazzling lights, Emma realized something important. Love wasn't about avoiding challenges. It was about facing them side by side, and if anyone could navigate those complexities, it was them. As the weekend drew to a close, Jonathan took Emma to a rooftop garden overlooking Manhattan. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, settling gently on the plants and benches below. He turned to her, his expression serious yet tender. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know we come from different worlds, and I know there will be hurdles ahead. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone before. You've changed me. You've made me want to be better, to live authentically. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is..." He paused, searching for the right words. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she waited, her heart pounding in anticipation. Finally, Jonathan smiled, a mixture of vulnerability and determination. in his eyes. "I want us to keep building this, to take whatever comes our way and face it together. Because even though our worlds may seem miles apart, I believe we can create something extraordinary, something real." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Me too." In that moment, amidst the snowfall and city lights, they sealed their commitment, not with grand gestures or promises of perfection, but with a quiet understanding that love was worth fighting for. As they returned to Maplewood hand in hand, they knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. But they also knew they had already overcome so much, proving that their connection was built on a foundation stronger than circumstance. Together, they were ready to write the next chapter of their story, one filled with hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that true love transcends boundaries. The weeks that followed Emma and Jonathan's New York trip were a blur of emotions, decisions, and adjustments. Back in Maplewood, life seemed to move at its usual pace. But for Emma, everything felt different. She carried the memories of their weekend together like treasures, hidden gems tucked away in her heart. The rooftop garden, the snowflakes dancing in the air, Jonathan's heartfelt words. They replayed in her mind whenever doubts crept in. Yet, despite the warmth of those moments, reality began to settle in. Their worlds weren't just different, they were polar opposites. And while love had brought them closer, practicalities threatened to pull them apart. Jonathan, too, was navigating uncharted waters. For years, he had lived by a strict set of rules dictated by his family and society, a relentless pursuit of success, an unyielding focus on appearances, and a carefully curated image designed to shield him from vulnerability. But Emma had shattered that facade, forcing him to confront parts of himself he had long buried. He wanted nothing more than to be with her, to build a life rooted in authenticity rather than pretense. Yet every step forward came with challenges. His board members questioned his priorities, old friends raised eyebrows, and even some relatives hinted that his relationship with Emma might harm the family name. Still, Jonathan refused to let go. If anything, the resistance only strengthened his resolve. One chilly morning, as Emma prepared for her shift at Peggy's place, she received a call from Jonathan. His voice was unusually strained, tinged with frustration. "Can we talk later?" he asked, his tone urgent yet measured. Emma agreed, sensing that something significant was weighing on him. That evening, after closing up the diner, she met him at his estate on the outskirts of town. The sprawling property looked serene under the pale moonlight, but inside, tension crackled in the air. Jonathan greeted her warmly, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. They sat by the fireplace, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. After a long pause, Jonathan finally spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "About how much I want this, to build a future with you. But there are things I need to address first, things I can't ignore anymore." Emma listened intently, her heart pounding as she braced herself for what was coming next. Jonathan took a deep breath before continuing. "My father called me today. He's not happy about us. In fact, he made it clear that if I continue seeing you, it could jeopardize my position within the company." Emma's stomach tightened at his words. She had known this moment would come eventually, but hearing it aloud made it feel real and terrifying. "What does that mean?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Jonathan hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "It means I have a choice to make," he replied. "Either I walk away from you and maintain the status quo, or I fight. For us, even if it means losing everything else." The weight of his statement hung between them, thick and suffocating. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Emma stared into the fire, trying to process the enormity of what Jonathan was saying. She knew how much his work meant to him, not just financially but emotionally. It was the foundation of his identity, the legacy he had spent decades building. To risk it all for her, she wasn't sure she could ask that of him. "You shouldn't have to choose," she whispered finally, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." Jonathan reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Emma," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside him. "You're not asking me to choose. You already have my heart. This isn't about sacrifice, it's about priorities. Yes, my career is important, but it's not who I am. You've shown me that there's more to life than titles and bank accounts. If I let fear dictate my choices, then I'm no better than the person I used to be, the person I desperately want to leave behind." His words resonated deeply, but Emma couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her. Was it fair to expect him to give up so much? What if, down the line, resentment crept in? What if he regretted choosing her over his family's expectations? These questions haunted her, making sleep elusive and turning even simple tasks into overwhelming burdens. Meanwhile, Jonathan wrestled with his own fears. He loved Emma with every fiber of his being, but the thought of disappointing his father, a man whose approval he had sought his entire life, was almost unbearable. For days, they both retreated into themselves, grappling with the enormity of the decision before them. Eventually, Emma realized she couldn't bear the silence any longer. One afternoon, during a rare break at the diner, she sent Jonathan a text. "We need to figure this out, together." Within minutes, he arrived, looking weary but determined. They walked to a nearby park, their breath visible in the frosty air, and sat on a bench overlooking a frozen pond. Without preamble, Emma turned to him. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Maybe we don't have to see this as an ultimatum. Maybe there's a way to honor both your dreams and ours." Jonathan frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Emma hesitated, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "Your father values tradition and stability, right? So maybe we show him that we can bring those qualities to our relationship without compromising who we are. We take small steps, introduce him to my family, involve him in decisions, prove that we're committed to each other in ways that matter. It won't be easy, but it might help ease his concerns." Her suggestion caught Jonathan off guard, but as he considered it, hope began to bloom in his chest. Perhaps compromise wasn't weakness, perhaps it was strength, a way to bridge the gap between their worlds without losing sight of what truly mattered. "That sounds like a plan," he said slowly, a tentative smile spreading across his face. "But are you sure you're ready for that? Dealing with my father won't be pleasant." Emma nodded, her resolve firm. "If it means fighting for us, then yes, I'm willing to try." Her courage inspired Jonathan, filling him with renewed determination. Together they devised a strategy. Jonathan would arrange a meeting with his father, during which Emma and her family would join them. It wouldn't be confrontational, it would be collaborative, an opportunity to demonstrate that their relationship was built on mutual respect and shared values. The meeting took place a week later at Jonathan's estate. Tension hung thick in the air as everyone gathered in the formal dining room, awkward pleasantries exchanged over cups of tea. Emma's mother and brother sat stiffly beside her, their nervousness evident, while Jonathan's father maintained an icy demeanor, his disapproval palpable. Jonathan opened the conversation, addressing his father directly. "Dad," he began, his tone respectful but unwavering, "I understand your concerns. But Emma isn't just someone I care about, she's someone who makes me better, someone who reminds me of what really matters. I'm asking you to give her, and us, a chance." To everyone's surprise, his father didn't immediately dismiss the plea. Instead, he studied Emma and her family closely, searching for signs of sincerity. Slowly, grudgingly, he began to soften, acknowledging the effort they had made to meet him halfway. By the end of the afternoon, though far from enthusiastic, he agreed to support their relationship, on one condition, that they approach their future with caution and transparency. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was enough to give Emma and Jonathan hope. Over the following months, they worked tirelessly to balance their two worlds, finding creative solutions to the challenges that arose. Jonathan invested in local businesses in Maplewood, helping to revitalize the community while staying connected to his roots. Emma pursued her dream of opening a cafe with Jonathan's encouragement and financial backing. Together, they proved that love wasn't about sacrificing one world for another. It was about creating a new one entirely. As spring returned to Maplewood, painting the town in vibrant hues of green and gold, Emma and Jonathan celebrated their progress with quiet gratitude. They had faced storms and emerged stronger, their bond fortified by trust, patience, and resilience. Though uncertainty still lingered, they faced them hand in hand, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would navigate it together. Love, they had learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about partnership. And theirs was a partnership worth fighting for. As the months passed, Emma and Jonathan's lives became increasingly intertwined, blending their two worlds in ways neither of them had imagined possible. Their journey wasn't without its challenges, but each obstacle only deepened their commitment to one another. Jonathan continued to invest in Maplewood, pouring resources into revitalizing the town while ensuring that local traditions remained intact. His efforts earned him a newfound respect among the townsfolk, who began to see him not as an outsider, but as someone genuinely invested in their community. Meanwhile, Emma threw herself into her dream of opening a cafe, a cozy little spot, nestled between Peggy's place and the bakery where she lived. She named it Lily's Corner, a tribute to the woman whose memory had brought them together. The cafe quickly became a cornerstone of Maplewood, drawing customers with its warm ambiance and delicious offerings. Emma infused every detail with personal touches, hand-painted murals on the walls, mismatched chairs salvaged from thrift stores, and a playlist of classic songs that played softly in the background. The menu featured hearty comfort foods alongside innovative dishes inspired by Jonathan's travels. Together, they hosted events at the cafe, poetry readings, art exhibitions, and even cooking classes for kids. Each gathering strengthened the bond between them and reinforced their shared vision of creating something meaningful. Despite their successes, there were moments when doubt crept in. Jonathan's father, though supportive in theory, remained skeptical in practice. He attended family dinners begrudgingly, his polite smiles masking lingering disapproval. Some of Jonathan's colleagues whispered behind closed doors, questioning whether his relationship with Emma was clouding his judgment. Even Emma faced criticism from certain quarters, with some accusing her of using Jonathan for his wealth, or dismissing her ambitions as unrealistic. Yet through it all they stood firm, leaning on each other during difficult times and celebrating their victories no matter how small. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze outside Lily's Corner, Emma received an unexpected visit from Jonathan's mother. She walked into the cafe hesitantly, her elegant coat and designer handbag starkly contrasting with the rustic decor. Emma greeted her warmly, inviting her to sit at a corner table overlooking the street. For a few minutes they exchanged pleasantries, the conversation stilted and awkward. Then, surprising both of them, Jonathan's mother leaned forward, her expression softening. "I came here today because I wanted to understand," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "Jonathan has changed so much since he met you, and I needed to see why." Emma listened intently, touched by the vulnerability in her words. Over steaming cups of coffee, they talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives, their families, and their dreams. By the time they parted ways, tears glistened in both their eyes, not from sadness but from the realization that understanding could bridge even the widest gaps. That evening, Jonathan called Emma, his tone filled with awe. "My mom said she visited you today," he began, barely able to contain his excitement. "She told me how much she admires your strength and determination. Thank you for showing her what I've been trying to explain all along." The encounter marked a turning point in their relationship with Jonathan's family. Slowly but surely, his relatives began to embrace Emma, recognizing her sincerity and the positive influence she had on him. They attended holiday gatherings, together, celebrated milestones side by side, and even collaborated on projects aimed at improving Maplewood. With each passing day, the lines between their worlds blurred further, until it no longer felt like they were bridging two separate lives. It felt like they were building a single, unified future. Yet, amidst the progress, life continued to throw curveballs. One particularly challenging moment came when Emma's younger brother, Jake, faced trouble at school. A bright but restless teenager, he had always struggled with authority figures, often finding himself at odds with teachers and administrators. When rumors spread that he might be expelled, Emma panicked, unsure of how to help him without jeopardizing her own responsibilities. Jonathan stepped in without hesitation, using his connections to arrange meetings with school officials and advocate for Jake's potential rather than focusing on his mistakes. Together, they devised a plan that allowed Jake to stay in school while pursuing vocational training, a compromise that reignited his passion for mechanics and gave him a sense of purpose. Through helping Jake, Emma realized just how much Jonathan had become a part of her family. He wasn't just her partner, he was a pillar of support, someone who showed up when it mattered most. In return, she made sure to be present for him during his toughest moments, including a high-stakes business deal that threatened to derail his career. As negotiations grew tense and sleepless nights piled up, Emma reminded him to breathe, to trust his instincts, and to remember why he had chosen this path in the first place. Her unwavering faith in him carried him through, proving once again that their love was a two-way street built on mutual encouragement and belief. By winter, as snow blanketed Maplewood in a serene hush, Emma and Jonathan decided it was time to take their relationship to the next level. They had weathered storms together, faced judgment head-on, and proven that their connection was stronger than any external force. Now standing on the brink of a new chapter, they knew they were ready to make it official. On a quiet evening, after closing up Lily's Corner, Jonathan led Emma to a secluded spot by the lake. The air was crisp, the stars twinkling above like diamonds scattered across velvet. Kneeling before her, he pulled out a simple yet elegant ring, a symbol of their journey thus far and the promise of what lay ahead. "Emma Carter," he began, his voice steady, despite the emotion welling in his chest. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible. You've shown me the beauty and simplicity, the strength and vulnerability, and the power of unconditional love. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Emma's face as she nodded, her heart overflowing with joy. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. 1,000 times yes. Their engagement sent ripples of excitement through Maplewood, uniting the town in celebration. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers gathered at Lily's Corner for an impromptu party, filling the space with laughter, music, and heartfelt congratulations. Jonathan's family joined in, their initial reservations replaced by genuine happiness for the couple. It was a night filled with love and unity, a testament to how far they had all come since that fateful kiss in Peggy's place. Planning the wedding became a labor of love, with everyone pitching in to create something uniquely theirs. Emma insisted on keeping things intimate, opting for a ceremony held outdoors surrounded by nature. Jonathan agreed, adding personal touches that reflected their story, from handwritten vows to a playlist of songs that held special meaning. On the big day, as Emma walked down the aisle lined with wildflowers, her mother by her side and Jake grinning proudly, she locked eyes with Jonathan. Standing beneath a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, he looked at her with a mixture of awe and adoration, his heart laid bare for the world to see. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, cheers erupted from the crowd, echoing through the trees. They sealed their union with a kiss, one that spoke volumes about the journey they had undertaken and the adventures yet to come. As they danced under the stars later that evening, surrounded by loved ones, Emma rested her head against Jonathan's shoulder. "We did it," she murmured, her voice filled with wonder. "Against all odds, we really did it." Jonathan kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "And we'll keep doing it," he replied softly. Together. Their love story, born out of chance and nurtured through perseverance, had transformed not only their lives, but also the lives of those around them. It was proof that true love transcends boundaries, defies expectations, and creates magic where none seemed possible. And as they embarked on this new chapter, Hand in hand, they knew their greatest adventures were still ahead. Life after the wedding was a beautiful blend of familiarity and new beginnings for Emma and Jonathan. They settled into their routines with an ease that surprised even themselves, their days filled with laughter, shared dreams, and quiet moments of gratitude. The house they chose to call home was neither in the heart of Maplewood nor on the sprawling grounds of Jonathan's estate. It was a charming cottage nestled on the outskirts of town, surrounded by towering trees and fields of wildflowers. It was a compromise that symbolized their life together, rooted in simplicity yet touched by elegance, a perfect reflection of who they were individually and as a couple. Emma continued running Lily's Corner, her cafe thriving more than ever. What had started as a small dream had grown into a beloved institution, drawing visitors from neighboring towns and even cities. People came not just for the food but for the warmth and community the place exuded. Emma took pride in knowing she had created something lasting, something that brought joy to others. She often joked that the cafe felt like their first child, a project born out of love and nurtured with care. Jonathan, ever supportive, would visit during his lunch breaks, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee while chatting with customers or helping behind the scenes when things got busy. Jonathan, too, found fulfillment in his work, though he approached it differently now. No longer driven solely by profit margins or societal expectations, he focused on projects that aligned with his values, initiatives aimed at uplifting communities, supporting local businesses, and fostering innovation. He became known not just as a billionaire but as a visionary who used his resources to make a difference. His transformation didn't go unnoticed. Colleagues admired his leadership style, employees appreciated his humility, and even skeptics began to see him in a new light. Yet despite his success, he remained grounded, always reminding himself of the lessons Emma had taught him about authenticity and purpose. Their marriage wasn't without its challenges, of course. Blending two vastly different worlds required constant communication, patience, and compromise. There were days when old habits resurfaced, when Jonathan's meticulous planning clashed with Emma's spontaneous nature, or when Emma's desire for simplicity conflicted with Jonathan's inclination toward grand gestures. But instead of letting these differences divide them, they embraced them as opportunities to grow. They learned to listen deeply, to validate each other's perspectives, and to find middle ground without losing sight of what made them unique. One of the most significant tests of their relationship came when Emma decided to expand Lily's Corner. Her vision was ambitious, to open a second location in a nearby city, but it required substantial investment and risk. Jonathan encouraged her every step of the way, offering guidance and financial support while respecting her independence. Still, doubts lingered in her mind. Was she biting off more than she could chew? Would this expansion strain their relationship, especially if things didn't go as planned? Sensing her hesitation, Jonathan sat her down one evening, his expression serious yet kind. "Emma," he said, taking her hands in his, "you've never been afraid of hard work or chasing your dreams. This is no different. I believe in you, not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are." His words gave her the courage to move forward, and together they navigated the complexities of launching the new cafe. It wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, unexpected setbacks, and moments of self-doubt. But through it all, they celebrated each milestone, no matter how small. When the second Lily's Corner finally opened its doors, Emma dedicated it to Jonathan, thanking him publicly for believing in her when she struggled to believe in herself. The gesture touched him deeply, reinforcing the unbreakable bond they shared. As the years passed, their family grew in ways neither of them had anticipated. Jake, Emma's younger brother, became a skilled mechanic and opened his own garage, inspired by Jonathan's mentorship and unwavering support. He often joked that he owed his success to the billionaire brother-in-law who wouldn't take no for an answer. Meanwhile, Emma and Jonathan welcomed a daughter into their lives, a bubbly little girl named Lily, named after the woman whose memory had sparked their journey. Raising her became their greatest adventure, teaching them the joys and challenges of parenthood while deepening their appreciation for the sacrifices their own parents had made. Lily's presence brought a renewed sense of purpose to their lives. Emma reveled in the everyday joys of motherhood, the giggles during bath time, the sticky fingers clutching cookies, the bedtime stories whispered under the covers. Jonathan, once unsure of how to navigate fatherhood, quickly discovered his natural ability to connect with his daughter. He read her books about faraway lands, taught her to ride a bike, and patiently answered her endless questions about the stars. Watching them together, Emma couldn't help but marvel at how much Jonathan had changed since the day they met. The man who had once seemed untouchable, distant, and burdened by his wealth was now a devoted husband and father, finding happiness in the simplest of moments. Their story continued to inspire those around them. Friends and neighbors often remarked on how seamlessly they balanced their roles, how Emma managed to run a successful business while being a loving wife and mother, and how Jonathan juggled his demanding career with his responsibilities at home. They weren't perfect. They argued, they stumbled, they made mistakes. But they always found their way back to each other, guided by love, respect, and a shared commitment to building a life worth living. Maplewood itself flourished under their influence. With Jonathan's investments and Emma's determination, the town transformed into a vibrant hub of creativity and opportunity. New businesses sprouted up, old traditions were revived, and a spirit of collaboration replaced the isolation that had once defined the community. Even Jonathan's father, who had initially opposed their relationship, came to admire the impact they had made. During one of his rare visits, he pulled Jonathan aside and admitted, "You were right about her. She's extraordinary, and so are you." It was a moment of reconciliation that brought tears to both men's eyes. Looking back on their journey, Emma and Jonathan often reflected on how far they had come. From that rainy afternoon in Peggy's place to the life they had built together, theirs was a story of resilience, growth, and unwavering faith in the power of love. They had faced judgment, doubt, and countless obstacles. Yet they had emerged stronger, proving that true connection transcends boundaries of class, status, and expectation. Their love wasn't just a fleeting spark. It was a steady flame, fueled by trust, understanding, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. On a crisp spring morning, as Lily played in the garden and birds chirped in the trees, Emma turned to Jonathan with a smile. "Do you remember that day in the diner?" she asked, her voice soft with nostalgia. Jonathan chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "How could I forget? That kiss changed everything." Emma rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "It gave us a chance to rewrite our stories," she murmured. "And look where we are now." They stood there for a moment, watching their daughter chase butterflies and feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. Life hadn't turned out exactly as either of them had imagined, but it was better. Richer, fuller, more meaningful. Together, they had created something extraordinary. A partnership built on equality, a family rooted in love, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As they walked hand in hand toward the future, they knew one thing for certain: their story was far from over. And whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, side by side, hearts intertwined.